Welcome to HMG Live.
How are we more responsible with our employees by making sure that we have created the most, equitable and inclusive workforce, and are taking, actions, not just words, but actions to ensure that we have a workplace where employees can do the work of their lives.
It is time to look at this thoughtfully and really seize on the opportunities that it provides us.
This is an opportunity to change the way we work, to change the way we collaborate, to change the culture of the whole workforce in the United States.
A lot of the decisions that you make may or may not be right at the end of the crisis, right? So you have to be courageous enough to continue to make those decisions very quickly.
The focus now is the fusion of human and technology, and how do we have organizations that are technology organizations, but are human, they're distinctly human.
This will be a time of innovation.
HMG Live virtual summits are offered by HMG Strategy, your global partner helping you reinvent an innovative future of work. A warm welcome to today's host, lead principal and CEO of HMG Strategy, Hunter Muller.
Good morning and welcome. Welcome to the 2020 Southern California CIO Virtual Summit. I'm Hunter Muller, lead principal of HMG Strategy. My team and I are delighted to be here with you today. Reimagining the business and the future of work, what you need to know now. I think we have a world-class agenda, a world-class lineup of speakers. Let's get on with it. So a big shout out to our partners today, Darktrace, Duo, and Tanium. The summit's powered by Darktrace, Duo, and Tanium. Really appreciate your support in the HMG platform, and please, when they reach out to you, connect and set up a meeting and find out a little bit more about their services. I'd like to bring in Mark Taylor, the president of CISM International. Mark, welcome to the program.
Anna, thanks so much. I really appreciate you opening the door for the CISM and CISM National and CISM SoCal chapter. The SoCal chapter is just an exceptional group, a great set of leaders led by Helen, Norris, the president of the chapter, and they have just been a friend of yours, a friend of mine as well, and they do a remarkable job in reaching their community in SoCal through leadership, as well as all the investments they make in their STEM community. So my hat's off to them, and thank you to you for hosting this and making that investment in the SoCal chapter.
Great, Mark. Thanks for making it today. And Helen, over to you. Good to see you.
Great. Thank you. Good to see you, Hunter. Good to see you, Mark. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and to thank a big thank you to the HMG team for all the work that you've done to make this a great event. I'm delighted to provide this opportunity to connect under these unusual circumstances to Southern California CISM members and others. For those who aren't members, please let me encourage you to consider the benefits of a CISM membership, especially during these unusual times. We've always focused on great networking and learning opportunities, usually in person, and we're now finding really creative ways to do those, including events like these with our partners like HMG, virtual networking events, and we're extremely excited about our Resilience Roadmap series, focused on helping our members to thrive, not just to survive during the pandemic. So please visit our website as outlined on the slide there, or at scsim.org. And again, thank you to Hunter and your team for your collaboration with CISM on this event. I'm really looking forward to the great content and to the engaging and exciting speakers.
Excellent. Thanks, Helen. Great to have you here too as well, and appreciate the support and partnership. Hey, big thanks for zooming in. Let's get on with the program here today. First up is Thomas Phelps, VP of Corporate Strategy and CIO of Laserfiche. Thomas, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Hunter. I'm so delighted to be here today with you all. You're in for a real treat. We're going to talk with Michael Fung, who is the former CFO of Walmart US. We're going to hear about what conversations are taking place in a corporate boardroom about responding to the pandemic, recovering the business, and what digital transformation means to corporate boards everywhere. So Michael, you have a very fascinating background, going from being an officer in the Army to being a finance leader for the very largest company in the world, and now you're serving on corporate boards. Tell us briefly about your background and your current companies where you are the audit committee chair.
So Thomas, as you've indicated, had a career in finance really throughout my life. have a chance to serve on 4 boards of directors now. You know, I'm a CPA, yes, MBA type of finance background, and been a chief financial officer of a variety of companies. The 4 companies I'm on the board are today, 2 are consulting companies. One's based in Chicago, principally a cost cutting type of organization that helps companies optimize their expenses. The second one is Franklin Covey, which is located in Salt Lake City, and it's about leadership development, content development and training. And then I'm on the boards of 2 retailers. One is Floor & Decor's headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia, and they're a category killer. They specialize in hard floor coverings. And so whether that's tile, wood, vinyl plank, et cetera, you know, throughout the nation, and actually very rapidly growing. The 4th board that I'm on is really 99 Cent Store. As indicated, it's really a dollar store chain in about 4 or 5 different states, almost 600 individual stores. But the unique thing about 99 is it sells fresh produce in addition to other food items, in addition to the general merchandise. But those are the 4 boards I'm on.
You know, Michael, all great companies. I've been at some of them. How are they doing with the COVID-19 crisis? I saw that Franklin Covey was trading at around $35 back in February 21st. As of 10 a.m. today, it is less than $18 a share. But on the other hand, Floor & Decor is nearing its 52-week high at over $60 today.
So I think it's a worthwhile, if we sort of take those 2 individual companies that highlighted about what their reaction in COVID-19, what they've done and how it's impacted and why they're respectively trading at those dollar values. First of all, Franklin Covey had a delay from COVID-19, and what they do is actually they sell high-end services really to CEOs and chief operating officers because it's about leadership development, the highest level. They don't do things like, they don't compete against LinkedIn with the lower level type of jobs. And so it's really at very senior levels. And so you can imagine when you're dealing with senior levels, you generally meet with them, you network, you basically solidify very significant deals. This is really with whether it's United Airlines, Marriott, et cetera. And so although Franklin Covey had the ability to provide training by all modalities really that any client wanted, whether individual desktops, virtual or anything else, most companies still prefer to have an in-person facilitator lead that type of training and use the other tools really online. And so because they weren't able to meet in person, a lot of those companies rescheduled the various events, okay, so they could do a virtual online or create that type of learning experience that they were going to be happy with. Because of that delay and because the licensees that we have in Japan and also China and throughout the world because of COVID-19 could not meet, you had a reduction in revenue of almost 33%. So as a result, earnings took a big hit, and so did really the stock price. The stock price you actually need to sort of ignore for the next 12 to 18 months, almost all companies, because it's really about what will 21 and 22 look like. And we're pretty comfortable that Franklin Covey will get back on a double-digit earnings growth. If you look at Floor & Decor, Floor & Decor was considered an essential business, just like Home Depot. And so therefore, they were not shut down, except for individual regional counties based upon COVID-19 restrictions. And what Floor & Decor did was they virtually switched very quickly, although they did a lot of virtual type of customer visits, sort of designing using virtual tools, what the color of your new flooring in your particular home would look like in the future. What they quickly morphed into was making it rather seamless for customers, in which customers didn't want to walk into retail stores and interact really with the associates or even with some other customers. And so although Floor & Decor could have been open, they decided to shut down to basically protect their employees and basically conducted visual tours of product selections, colors really for the customers. They literally took iPads and on an individual one-on-one with customers, walked through the store and showed them the colors, the features, the design capabilities, and they basically drastically increased sales using e-commerce and also through drop-offs. And so it's basically a huge, very quick adaptation to what was happening in connection with COVID-19. And that's why the stock price, is close to, I think today, $61 because it was trading before about $40, $45. And so it's had a tremendous increase, and it was growing. It has comp sales currently, in the high double digits. And in retail, it's almost impossible to have that type of comp sales.
Michael, along with what you just mentioned, there was an impact to the supply chain because of tariffs. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
So the difference in supply chain from COVID-19, you can't get the product because let's say in China, at the particular factories, the factories were shut down. You had no over-the-road transportation getting it from those factories which were shut down even to the ports. And so therefore you didn't have the ability to obtain the product really from the factories in the Far East or some of your vendors. In connection with tariffs really is a cost margin issue that over time companies were migrating away from countries that had trade imbalances with the United States. And so as a result, the Trump administration was adding tariffs on. Now, quite frankly, the entrepreneurs who sort of own those factories were already moving based upon their cost competitiveness because labor is a huge cost really throughout the world, and therefore China's actually lost that advantage really on labor. I know that's unusual to sort of understand and see, and therefore was already moving to Vietnam and other places. There are some products that you can only get out of China. I think I used the example before where if you want Christmas tree lights, the only 3 companies that produce them are only in China. So you expect to sell Christmas tree lights in your retail stores, you have to source them out of China. But again, one was COVID-19, there was no supply. The other one was basically you were trying to migrate your supply to different vendors in other countries.
Yesterday, the Wall Street Journal reported that 10% of packaged foods, beverages, and household goods were out of stock this month in July already. What we really want to know is, Michael, what really caused almost 36% of US supermarkets to just completely run out of toilet paper back in March?
So to give you an idea, although 10% out of stock may not seem like much, Walmart basically had a principle they didn't want to ever be below 3%. So for you to be over three times really out of stock is just incredible. What happened with toilet paper, we would call it pantry loading. You had 3 times the demand for toilet paper in a very short period of time. And so people who didn't need toilet paper till next week, 2 weeks from now, or later in the month went out and bought it. And so again, you tripled the demand in a very short period of time. People were hoarding it. I'm not sure why, because you can't eat it. And so as a result, you cannot sort of increase factory production and capacity fast enough, nor would you, because you have actually a very stable population growth really in the United States. You could sort of estimate what demand will be. You're not going to steal instantly 50% share from your competitors. So there was actually a fairly decent growth pattern for sales of toilet paper, whether Ultra Soft by Charmin or whoever else, the brand you may like. But you had this tripling of demand overnight, and it's happened really in a variety of goods. Macaroni and cheese by Kraft, no one wanted processed foods really previously. Now everyone, because they're stuck at home and they have to cook, they want the easiest items really to cook, what the kids sort of demand, that tastes pretty decent, so suddenly processed foods is popular again. And so as a result, all shelf-stable, fairly easy items in the supermarket sort of became out of stock. To see noodles, spaghetti, to see canned goods all out of stock, it was basically an incredible rush, hoarding, and it's only recently coming back in stock. But what the manufacturers did to increase capacity, or really the production of the SKUs that were in demand, was they simplified their product line. So instead of producing 20 types of, let's say, spaghetti sauce, they now produce the 10 most popular to basically keep those lines running as efficiently as possible. But there's no way to basically offset a tripling in demand overnight.
So now we've loaded up on the pantries. Let's talk about the role of the CIO. We've seen miscues where CEOs and corporate boards have completely missed shifts in consumer preferences and technology pivots in the market. We've all heard of stories about Blockbuster having the opportunity to acquire Netflix for $50 million and just passed on it. We know how that ended. So Michael, what is the role of the CIO from your perspective when it comes to advising the C-suite and all of us on this call today on how technology can either disrupt or innovate their business?
I think it's a critical role that the CIOs sort of play. Let me sort of talk about the other senior members of management, whether it's the chief operating officer, the CEO, or CFO. They're dealing with a lot of tactical issues, as you can imagine. They're trying to increase market share, overall profitability, take care of their investors. And obviously, when they develop their business plans and strategic plans, they should be anticipating the classic threats to their marketplace and to their environment. It's actually very difficult to cannibalize your most profitable products or groups. I'll use Walmart as an example, okay? Because I was there a long time. And when Amazon came out, we looked at their business model. We said, this doesn't make any sense. They're losing money on everything they sell. And so therefore, did we consider the internet or people like Amazon a threat? No, we did not. We actually estimated that e-commerce sales would sort of rise to maybe 10% of overall retail sales. Again, you have to eliminate, car dealerships, convenience stores, gas stations. And so that meant we thought 90% of all retail sales in the United States would still take place in bricks and mortar stores. With COVID-19, that's increased to about 22% now. But I'll tell you this, that's something most of the people don't realize. Walmart today and their e-commerce sales makes no money. Amazon, for anything they buy and resell on a retail site, they also don't make any money. Those of you who understand, for Amazon Web Services, obviously it makes a ton of profitability, but the marketplace fees and services makes money really for Amazon. So what the CIO needs to do is actually be very broad-based and think about truly what is the disruptive nature of this new technology can really lead to, from either a process standpoint, from a customer standpoint, and really have to sort of build the business case and flesh it out really for the CEO and also the senior team. If the CIO can't do that, then it becomes, okay, we got to take care of privacy concerns out of the European Union, or it's a new toy or something that the IT folks wants to have. And so you have to sort of spend a lot of time, and it's very tough for senior management to basically cannibalize their existing profitability. Back in the Walmart example, 80% of the entire profitability when Amazon came out for Walmart was earned in the bricks and mortar stores. That was on a worldwide basis when the US only accounted for 60-odd% of total sales.
Thank you, Michael. So as we wrap up in about 45 seconds, what are some ways that IT leaders can seek opportunities to serve on corporate boards? And please comment on diversity and inclusion as well on these boards.
So get visibility, be an expert in your field, become visible, basically speak at conferences. And also what you need to do is network with other board members and basically say, hey, I want to get on a board, okay? And it's really about leading transformational change. By the way, when we talk about diversity and inclusion on boards, it's really female, male first, and then basically ethnic is actually very low on the list. So it's really about the skills and experience, especially from a strategic perspective, that you bring to the board that will create demand for you. But get to network, develop a plan, and work the plan if you're interested in getting on a board.
Thank you, Michael. We really appreciate you being here today to share with us all your insights. Hunter, back to you.
Great job, Thomas, and thank you so much. Really insightful interview. Next up, we have Chris Hallenbach. Chris is the America's CISO for Tanium. Chris, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me, Hunter.
Great to see you. Hey, you've had an amazing career. I mean, you could have gone anywhere, done anything, and we cover career a lot here at HMG. Why did you go to Tanium?
Well, most of my career has been, in some way, shape, or form, been around incident response and security. But the 7 years or so before Tanium was at US CERT, where I did exclusively incident response. And after a while of doing the kind of the Groundhog Day of responding to events, sometimes going back to the same victims over and over again and just not seeing them get better, I was looking for some place that I could go to fill in that gap, break the reactive cycle around it. And Tanium's platform really provided an opportunity to both help with the incident response piece, which is still going to have to happen, but also do that proactive work in the IT hygiene space so that you can really break that cycle.
So there's been a bunch of announcements recently around partnerships with Verizon, one with Okta, around Zero Trust, right? And most recently, an investment by Salesforce. What's going on?
Just, a validation of what our platform is and what it brings to people. When it comes to Zero Trust, it's first and foremost tends to be a focus around the identity of the person and the resources they're accessing at that moment. But then a crucial piece of that is knowing that the system that they're doing that from is actually secure. And we provide that visibility into the endpoint. So that's where the integrations with things like Okta make a lot of sense. With Verizon, they bring a lot of services into play that can leverage the rich data and insight that we have from the endpoint. And then for Salesforce, they have this understanding of the relationships between people. That's the bread and butter of what they do. But again, they need that insight and that reach to the endpoint to complete that linkage. And it's just, again, a validation of our platform that they chose us to partner with.
Exciting times, really interesting stuff going on at Tanium. That's excellent. You spend a lot of time with clients across industry. What's changed in the last 4 months in the work from home environment, and where are the pressure points, the pain points, and potentially the exposures or vulnerabilities?
The first part was obviously just keep the lights on, everyone, supporting people in their work from home world. So that was the focus. For the first part was just ensure connectivity was there for everyone. And then over time that has started to shift. People at first were worried about basic things, making sure that the systems could even VPN in to infrastructure. And then now it's shifted to maintaining those systems, being able to patch them and get security monitoring on them, things of that sort. So that's really where it's shifted to. And, it's going to be interesting where things go over the next year or so. And that's realistically the horizon we're looking at with COVID is really a year or more out. We're still not out of the first phase of the COVID infection, or that first curve. So realistically, people are starting to realize that we're not all going back to the home, our offices. We're staying at home, and so we have to look at new tools or existing tools that will help us do that monitoring piece. For a little while, everyone could set aside their plans for continuous patching, but you can only do that for a month or two, and then you have to start getting back into a regular rhythm, and that may mean that your existing tools just don't answer for that.
Hey, Chris, it's been said when you're a CIO, it's difficult to be a CIO in a tech company. I got to believe it's pretty difficult to be a CISO in a security company. What's that like, and what's the culture like at Tanium?
Well, so it's actually kind of easy and hard at the same time. There's always new ideas that people have, so that's going to be both hard and fun, because you always are going to be trying to find new ways of doing things and doing it securely. Being surrounded by a bunch of really smart people who have new ideas at all the time is the thing that keeps you energized. It's interesting though also because that means we're a target. People will look at us and just like any other technology company, they're going to look at us as an avenue to access or gain insight to other customers. The way that we operate, however, is that it's a product that's the customer controls. So fortunately, gaining access to us doesn't gain an intruder access to our ultimate customers in the same manner. But yeah, it's a fun time to be here.
Do you have any recommendations for your customers over the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, plan for that long haul, like I said. While some people may be able to return to offices, on the whole, it's still going to be work from home or work remotely. Your fundamentals of being able to patch your systems, do asset management, whether the system's connected to your network or not, vulnerability management, all of those things that traditionally require tools that are focused on you being connected to the corporate network. You're going to have to pivot and have a way of addressing those things, whether you're connected or not.
Do we have a poll too here to launch?
I think we do.
Team, do we have a poll? There it is.
There it is.
If you can fill out the poll, that would be great. And we'll wait for those results to come back, Chris. You know, when you think of the unique selling proposition or value proposition that Tanium delivers on, what do you think? What do you think about most?
The visibility piece, knowing what assets are in your environment, what is on those assets. That type of information is what's going to be able to drive so many other decisions that your organizations are going to have to make. If I know what software is out there, I can start to make decisions about whether or not it's being adequately utilized. Maybe I can reduce license counts, reduce costs. If I know what versions are out there, maybe I can standardize on a single version and reduce the attack surface or reduce how many things I have to patch.
You know, we have a fair amount of CIOs and C-1s on the line here. How should the CIO and CISO relate to each other in an ideal world?
Ideally in a very coordinated fashion. So, you know, the ideal is that they're looking at projects more holistically across the enterprise. And that's starting to shift and starting to happen more often. Typically, though, the way budgets are aligned, they're looking at their own budget and looking at specific projects and not looking at the capabilities. If I buy a given product, can that product be useful to the security team or vice versa? You know, if you can get one product to handle a lot of use cases for both teams, that's a win for the broader organization. And ideally, that type of coordination is going to help them both.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. Do we have the poll results? Can we show those? Okay. Chris, you want to interpret it?
Not a lot of surprises here. You know, again, the asset management, patch and vulnerability of remote systems becomes a real big issue. And close second to that is being able to see and touch those systems and worry about, are you getting alerting off of them? And followed not too far behind that is the cost reduction. That's an area that's going to just accelerate, obviously. A lot of organizations paused initially in terms of acquisitions. Now it's doing a close look at where are they spending money, where are the opportunities to recoup some of those costs or reduce them. And so that's really not a surprise. I'm curious what else is in that other bucket, though.
You know, hey, right, there you go, Chris. Hey, Chris, thanks for coming on the program. Great job. And in the future, I know Tanium is going to be a HMG marketplace partner, and I'm looking forward to having that come to fruition soon. In the interim, what can they do to reach out to you and connect to you or Tanium?
Connecting to Tanium is easy, www.tanium.com. There's a great deal of information out there, solution briefs, other information about how we operate, and then even YouTube channels that give you insights into different parts of the platform.
Thanks again, Chris. Great to see you.
Thank you.
See you soon. Bye now. Next up, it's Joel Manfredo and Nicole Eagan on securing the future of work, how cyber AI learns on the job. Hey, Joel, welcome to the program, my friend.
Great to be here. Happy to be part of this program. I think the lineup was awesome, and we're blessed today with the Chief Strategy Officer and Artificial Intelligence Officer from Darktrace. Truth be told, I was an early adopter of the product, and Nicole, I'm here to let you know that you have never let me down, so thank you. It's one of our most cherished tools in our portfolio. And with that, we don't have a lot of time, so let's get right to it. What effect, Nicole, did you see on digital transformation, both for you at Darktrace and for your customers?
Well, thanks, Joel, and thanks, Hunter and Joel, for having me here today. Yeah, in terms of the types of things we saw, it was really an interesting time for Darktrace in that we were just entering our fourth quarter of the year, right, and growing year over year at tremendous rate. So it was kind of a bizarre time to know we were going into our busiest time of year while everyone was remote working. So I think from that standpoint, similar to many of the companies and organizations on this call, first of all, we had to adapt to change very rapidly, right? And part of that was understanding what our customers were going through and how we could map to their challenges. That led us to really accelerating some of the items on our roadmap, right? So everyone was struggling, and I think they were trying to figure out, great, you had, you know, really good security when you were all sitting back in your offices and in your corporate headquarters, but how did that extend to people working from their kitchen table, right? Connecting to a cloud or connecting to that corporate network. So we accelerated a lot of items around and really launched a new initiative called Dynamic Workforce, right? And that whole idea that who still knows how this is going to play out, but we know one thing, we're going to have to keep adapting, and we're going to have employees working from home, employees working maybe 20% of them from the office, and this could continue on. So I think, you know, learning how to really adapt and realize our workforces are going to be more dynamic than they've ever had to be. And then finally, again, similar to most people on this call, how do you do all this and keep your culture intact? How do you keep it so that, you know, that same camaraderie, the same momentum, the same energy that you had in the office extends while we're all living on video conference? So those were really the things that changed for us. I think from working with our customers, you know, some of the things that we saw there were, we had some companies that, especially in the manufacturing sector, where they literally had to pivot overnight and they became providers of essential goods or essential services. So being able to secure them literally overnight while they made those transitions to essential services was really, really important. We also have a number of customers that were in the front lines, hospitals, healthcare providers, diagnostic centers, manufacturers of testing kits. And I think that what was unfortunate there for them was that, you know, although United Nations reached out really early on to the organized cyber criminals and said, let's have a ceasefire, especially against those organizations, that ceasefire never happened. So I think what we found, it was more important than ever that those companies had a good partner in Darktrace, and that we not only keep providing our technology to them, but we even gave free 24/7 services to make sure they were safe.
Good, good answer. Over the past few months, given the change in the environment, what kind of attack trends have you been seeing as a large portion of the workforce is remote?
Yeah, so the first trend that many of us saw back in that March-April timeframe was the number of new domains that got registered related to COVID-19. And the reason that was important is many of those domains were set up purely for cybercrime, right? Or to disseminate false information. And so there was such a big flurry of email-borne phishing attacks right off the gate. Luckily, we're still seeing the email attacks, but we are seeing less of them necessarily be specific to COVID. Ransomware increased. There was quite a significant increase in ransomware. And one of the things that we saw with some of that ransomware was it tended to be outside of what I call normal office hours. One thing I don't know that we all factored in is when people work from home, they work more flexible hours. They're not as fixed on a 8 to 5 or 9 to 6 schedule. And I think the attackers figured that out early on from the trends that they saw in the data patterns, and they started targeting more out of hours attacks. And that taxed already stretched thin security teams. So I think that combination of ransomware with out of hours attacks was a big trend. The final one I'd like to touch on that I don't think we talk about enough was insider threat. And all of a sudden you had employees, even if it wasn't on purpose, they were having to use new tools. They were having to make do. They were figuring out how to get creative. And unfortunately, a lot of that circumvented security policies. And so what we found was really important was being able to see that all of a sudden things like, you know, large file uploads to rare destinations outside of the company, those are on the rise, and that continues to be on the rise. So that would probably be the third one I would end on there.
Very enlightening. Thank you. Now that some organizations are beginning to go back to the offices, either full-time or in a hybrid, what themes do you expect in the future for security, economics, and practices? And how can AI models assist in this regard?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, that idea of the dynamic workforce is going to stay with us for some time to come. And the way I think AI really can uniquely help on that challenge is the way, for example, our AI models work is it actually learns normal behavior. Well, my normal behavior before might have been I was in an office working and I connected to traditional corporate tools, but then all of a sudden it changed and I was connecting again to that network from that kitchen table. Maybe I was using VPN, maybe I was living on Zoom more than I was before. And so what the AI actually did was it automatically learned those new patterns of behavior. And that, I think people underestimated the importance and the power, because usually security was about following the rules and writing policies, but now that all went out the window. So the fact that the AI could automatically learn those new patterns of behavior without security teams having to do anything, that was enormous. I think the other trends we're going to see going forward is around automation and efficiency, right? We heard earlier on this session how much digital transformation is driving forward. Well, together with that digital transformation, you've got to figure out how to continue to do more with less. And I think we're going to see another round of big demand for automation. We saw it definitely in our fourth quarter, where people want to know, how can the AI pause the attacks? How can they buy our team's time? So if the attack does happen at 3 a.m., it stops the attack until the security team gets back in at 8 a.m. Efficiency. For instance, AI can actually investigate 92% of the threats that humans used to have to investigate. AI can now do. How do we use that more effectively so that our human brain power is left for understanding things that require human context? So I think those are some of the big things. We're going to keep seeing the digital transformation. We're going to rely more on automation, but really using AI to understand this dynamic workforce and their new behavior as they kind of go back and forth. That's going to be critically important.
Okay, great answer. Well, that covered the AI portion of your title, and the last question has to do with your strategy title. And what do you see emerging as big industry trends going forward?
I think one of the big trends that we're seeing is what I would call service wrappers, and this means that we are seeing an uptick in companies wanting to partner not only for technology, but with services wrapped around the technology. And whether that's through a technology vendor who then wraps services around it, like we do with our proactive threat notification or threat hunting services, or whether that's people partnering with a managed security service provider that operates the technology on their behalf, we are definitely seeing an uptick in that area. I think the final thought would be, people want to bring this all together. They want to integrate all the pieces. I think they're really tired of a bunch of isolated islands of security, because if you have these isolated islands, you can't possibly bring that consistent bar up of consistent security, whether it's in the cloud, the email, the home office, wherever it is. You want to raise that bar. And so I think integration is the final trend we'll continue to see.
Nicole, delightful to catch up with you again. I loved your answers, great questions, and thank you for participating.
Hey, Joel, great job, really. And Nicole, always good to see you. Appreciate your support and constant engagement. And we have some news, right? Darktrace is a founding partner of the HMG Marketplace, something new. And we're doing a soft launch here today. I think, Nikki, are you ready to launch a link to the marketplace? People can preview the HMG Marketplace. Think of it as a reference center, a library to find out more about our partner companies like Darktrace, like Tanium, like Duo, and then set up a meeting. You're open to meet with folks, right, Nicole?
Absolutely. And this is, it's challenging for all of us that we can't be together at these events, right? But I think the next best thing is being able to connect through the marketplace. And we're committed that You won't be meeting necessarily with a salesperson. You're going to be meeting with myself, our senior executive team from Darktrace. You've got CIOs and CISOs who attend these meetings, and we love the opportunity to catch up and strategize together.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nicole. Really appreciate it. Great job. And folks, it is in the chat. You can take a look there. Next up is our panel on reimagining the business and the future of work. Wendy Pfeiffer, the CIO of Nutanix, is a good friend and a great HMG fan and partner, and an amazing CIO in the Valley. Wendy, welcome to the program today.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Nice to be here.
Good to see you. And I really enjoyed our prep call the other day. You know, what's on your mind right now? We're going through a really unique time in the history of our profession, right? The history of business, history of the world, and certainly the history of our profession. Wendy, what's on your mind right now?
Thanks for asking. A lot of things, I, like every other employee out there who's working from home, I have concerns about my family and just what's happening with them. I have concerns with our employees and what's happening with them. And I also have concerns for the number of folks in related industries who have lost their jobs. And so obviously that is affecting, my focus. But right now, I'm trying to understand, how do we move forward in a way that supports employee productivity when we know that we are struggling a little bit, all of us, with how long this is all going on and sort of the hybrid nature, the scattered nature of the inputs that we're getting. Look, from my perspective, it seems likely that most of us who can work remotely will need to do so through at least January. And if we're doing that with lots of other conditions happening at the same time, not the least of which is school-aged children at home, et cetera. So as we're looking at the future, there's the basic things, right? We're in cash preservation mode. Some of us, as one of the speakers mentioned earlier, are sort of in toilet paper hoarding mode. And I have to say, like, after the last round of not hoarding toilet paper, I'm like buying every package I can now, just in case, which is weird, but I can't help it. So we're in all of those modes. At the same time, Hunter, we have to figure out how to keep adapting to this new normal. In the beginning, we had these sort of, muscle memory of dealing with emergencies that led us through in IT. But now we're having to get creative. And especially, I'm having to get creative with myself and my team members to figure out new ways of working. Another one of the speakers mentioned that people are working different shifts, extended shifts. In my team, we're also changing roles. We're creating new roles that sort of mix up people's time that they need to focus on being on the phone or interacting, offering support, with some focused quiet time to think and to work. In the past, I had very distinct roles. I had, for example, technical support people whose job it was to be on the phone all day long, online all day long, dealing with tickets. And I had other people who wrote software code all day long. Well, it so happens that if someone has to be on the phone with 4 or 5 folks for a 10-hour shift, and they're sharing their small apartment with their spouse and a couple of little kids, that's just not a humane or effective way to work. Likewise, if I have a software engineer who is sheltering in place all by herself, and she is just struggling with the aloneness of that, and it's her job to focus and concentrate for 10 hours a day, that's not possible. So recently, we just changed up all of our roles and created mixed roles for everybody in the team. We also created a new org structure that allows us to create small teams focused on current issues like end user computing and end user computing cybersecurity from mixed mode public environments. So the short synopsis of what I just said is, we are having to be more creative as IT leaders and as people who deliver IT. And we need to continue to change and pivot and adapt in thousands of small ways and some major ways going forward, as long as that's required. Much like an immune system, right? We need to keep learning, we need to keep adapting, we need to keep building strength as the nature of this thing unfolds. And I got to tell you, I'm an old dog. These are new tricks, and so it's exhausting, but also energizing and exciting at the same time as we're starting to see success.
Wendy, great to have you on the program here. Stay with us. I'll circle back to you in just a minute.
Okay.
Next up, we have Chris Gates. Chris is the CTO of Allstate. Chris, how is the business at Allstate doing right now? And is insurance, the whole industry, is it changing?
Oh, Hunter, thanks for, first off, thanks for the invite. I'm super excited to be here. And yeah, part of what Wendy is talking about is hitting all of us. And from an insurance standpoint, our entire industry is being kind of turned upside down. The days of people wanting to insure assets that are precious to them, their homes, their automobiles, their valuables that they may have, are changing. They're really starting to get into more of an experience-based insurance model. We saw that coming. We saw that coming with Airbnb and Lyft and Uber and others, where you still need to have a mechanism to be able to provide insurance very dynamically, or insurance related to something like if you're only going to drive your car for a few days a month, right? You want some dynamic insurance coverage to do that. So we saw the trend coming, but I think the COVID situation has accelerated that dramatically. And it's coming into a lot of different markets that we have to be aware of and understand how we're going to position ourselves. And in some cases, connect some dots that probably wouldn't have made sense 6 months ago. They seem like really good business opportunities now.
Hey, Chris, as a CTO of a big organization, what are you doing now to reimagine and reinvent the whole technology platform?
Well, I think the fact that we're all remote is giving us a chance to be an even playing ground. So we're taking everybody and we're rethinking some of the core processes. To some extent, the inertia that's there in a physical building of just the way you always do things can be hard to overcome. And in a virtual world, you can't help but think differently. And in our case, when we're talking about shifting to more of a activity-based insurance processes, we're looking at our core processes that make sense in that particular world, and we're able to cross boundaries, boundaries that typically would not have been navigated because we've been doing things really well for many, many years. And we're able to look at the world kind of through a different lens. And we're driving that process. IT is driving that process, not only from a facilitation standpoint, but really harnessing the power of technology that we know is available and know that is capable of changing our industry.
They say don't let a good crisis go to waste. What are you doing differently now?
Well, you hit it. It's an opportunity to accelerate platforms like we're talking about today, whether it's a Zoom platform for communication and collaboration, some of the security protocols that we're looking at doing, accelerating those because of the need to protect our constituents wherever they are. And a lot of effort, Hunter, on monitoring and using analytics and artificial intelligence to really monitor your performance from a technology standpoint. So instead of having 250 locations around the United States, I got 100,000 plus employees working from a variety of places. Yet I still have to provide a high level of service and be able to respond to them. I can only do that through using technology. So we're using this crisis to accelerate some ideas that would have been probably on a 3-year horizon. We're pulling them all into right now, and we're getting busy and getting them out there so that our employees have a great experience, and we can do it with the staff that we have.
Hey, Chris, great to see you. Stay with us, will you please? I'll circle back to you in just a minute. Next up is Justin Hooper. Justin's the VP Global IT Operations at Ingram Micro. Ingram is a pretty big organization. Justin, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Hunter. Good to be here.
Hey, it's a unique time. What are you guys doing differently now in the pandemic and with this whole unrest in the country and the need for diversity and inclusion? Anything new from a technological perspective that people might not be thinking about?
You know, it's interesting. We've done a lot technologically, obviously, to react to the work from home, and a lot of it was revisiting some of the things that we had already been working on. And it was interesting to see the company pivot from always forward-looking, how do we get to the cloud, how do we do more rapid application development, to recognizing, my God, how do we connect into the network, and how do we get our people connected, and do we have the capacity, and do we have the things to do that? So on the technology side, a lot of what we've been doing is accelerating some of the software-defined infrastructure, because as we all know, supply chain and the bottleneck was in hardware. When we needed to expand our network, Cisco was out of network equipment and all the providers really were out of equipment. So going to software appliances, those were all journeys that we had already been on. And you know, to your point about diversity and inclusion and the workplace from that perspective, again, I think that the challenges we're facing right now and the questions that are being asked, it's a revisit of something that we've been talking about. I'm sure everybody on this panel has had discussions about diversity and inclusion, but this highlights and this accelerates, just like in the technology space, what we need to do here. As far as technology goes, I think we have the technology in place. We have great applications for HR in most big companies. We've got great tools like LinkedIn. It's about leadership now, and taking those technologies and using the networks that we have in place to seek better candidates and to seek more diverse candidates, and to you know, improve our organizations from that perspective. And I think that the unique thing about work from home may help us, though, you know, being an infrastructure, candidly in certain areas, and we're in Irvine, California, having a diverse workforce, especially ethnically diverse workforce in infrastructure, it's complicated, it's difficult, the demographics are not in our favor. But if we're able to expand and work from home and have our employee base be broader and be outside of this demographic, it really makes us think differently, and it allows us to dig deeper and search more broadly to diversify our workforce. So, you know, I think a lot of it, the technology has enabled it, but it's about leadership, and it's about using the technology and taking ownership of this process to make sure that we're doing what we can to help our companies.
When you think about it, right, it's we're incredibly innovative as a country and as a world. It really is a leveling force being able to have a remote workforce, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that allows us to be innovative now. And it also takes away some of the excuses of saying, hey, I don't have the opportunities where I live to dig as deep and to get as many qualified candidates as I liked. And I've got you know, my workforce looks and acts very similar. So now we have the ability to think creatively and use this as an opportunity and really to own it. Like I said, I think a lot of times we look at HR and we say, geez, if I had a diverse slate of candidates, I would be more likely to pick diverse candidates. And I think it's time to take the excuses away and own that, and use our networks to dig deeper, and to, you know, make sure that as we change the workforce and we reimagine it, that we reimagine it from a social experience as well.
Hey, Justin, great insights, and thanks for coming on the program today. Stay with me.
Thanks, Hunter. Will do.
Great. Hey, next up, Brian Shields. Brian probably has the best job out of anyone here. He's the VP of IT at the Boston Red Sox. Brian, it must be fun when you go to work in the morning or at night and you get to go see a game and probably have some popcorn and a hot dog, right?
Yeah, it sounds good. You know, first, thanks for having me, Hunter, and it's great to join the Southern Cal group. You know, unfortunately, those days are a little bit ahead of us now, or behind us in some respects. We, you know, like everyone, we have a lot of challenges ahead of us, and I think, like a lot of your guests, you know, I think for me, it's a bit of a wake-up call, right? You know, I mean, we all get sort of a bit complacent in our jobs, even if we, you know, are relatively strategic, you know, leaders. And I think this is just such a remarkable time for us to sort of think more broadly, more openly. Your last, you know, guest, Justin, I think, you know, said it really well, which I think, first and foremost, I think it's a great opportunity to revisit how you do staffing. You know, I mean, I think, you know, there's a current generation of managers, leaders, who I think are still a bit old school when it comes to sort of wanting to count heads in offices and things. If they can't count a head in a chair, they're not real somehow. And my hope is that this is a wake-up call, particularly to some of those individuals, that, you know, that like we need to be far more, you know, broad and outreaching and diverse, you know, with our workforce. And I sort of equated a bit to sort of having a successful sports franchise. I mean, you've got like a farm system, and you've got, you know, you've got sort of like, I guess your consultants might be a little bit of your, you know, some of your free agents, and you've got a core nucleus of individuals, and they don't all need to be kind of in the same rooms. You know, I mean, having a diverse set of resources, particularly in IT, where I think diversity has always been a bit of a challenge for many of us. I think it's a great wake-up call and a great opportunity, but I think it'll fuel innovation. And some of your guests said earlier, I think it's a great time for innovation. We're seeing it in a lot of businesses. In our world, you know, we're looking a great deal more now at like touchless solutions. I think it breathes new life into IoT. I think it, you know, creates opportunities in machine learning and driving productivity and collaboration, communication, and a whole host of things. And I think it sort of starts with, I think as Michael had said earlier, we're just kind of running a better business. And I think all of us are taking a close look at our budgets. And, you know, if I want to fuel innovation, I've got to sort of find the funding. And that means kind of revisiting some of the, you know, some of the norms that we had sort of established over the years. And so I think a lot of good behaviors and good learnings are going to come from all this, albeit, you know, a challenging time.
Excellent, Brian. Great to see you. Stay with me. I'll be back to you in a second. Hey, why don't we open it up? Everyone's microphones, open up everyone's microphone. And why don't we just kind of just do a round robin and questions. Jump in if you want to answer the question. The comment earlier I had about don't let a crisis go to waste. Wendy, what are you doing differently to drive your agenda and innovation?
You know, we are doubling down on things that others mentioned. Every place where we are using software-defined things, infrastructure as code, we are able to scale, we're able to change, we're able to support. And so we're moving more quickly to implement infrastructure as code everywhere we can, in our remote data centers, in our public cloud environments. And we're using the notion of logical zones to govern how we document what we do and how we talk about what we do across all of our teams, our application teams, our help desk teams, our you know, systems and network teams, and everything in between. So we're finding essentially these logical ways of connecting and coming together. And then we're moving as quickly as we can with these software-defined things or this infrastructure as code. In terms of the comments around diversity, absolutely being able to access candidates from you know, who work anywhere is a big deal for us. And also we're also doubling down right now on our returnships, because we find that you know, for example, people who took time off from work to care for parents or children are now able to find time to work, you know, in offset schedules from their homes. And so we're finding that as a real eager and creative source of talent these days.
Excellent stuff. And in terms of innovation, is this a time of innovation, Wendy?
It really, really is. In fact, especially a time of innovation, you know, as distinct from invention. I don't know the future of invention, or I don't know how creative people will be about brand new things right now, but we are taking things that already exist and we're putting them together in new ways. We're applying them differently and creatively in order to get the work done. What do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention. I think they have that a little bit wrong. It's the mother of innovation. You know, it really is a challenge for us in some key areas. And so we're using our products differently. We're using our team members differently. And frankly, we're just, you know, using our home environments differently. You know, I'm looking at you from the display of my kid's gaming computer, because it's just like a better computer. And so we're reusing things and using things differently. By the way, if you do much on your kid's gaming computer, you find out how well you are handling, you know, graphics and bandwidth and so on from your hubs, because there are challenges there.
Amazing. Thank you. Thanks, Wendy. Thanks for coming on the program today. Always good to see you. Hey, Chris, when you think of your leadership style in this crisis, how would you characterize it?
I think it's, I'm trying to over-index on really just being visible and being present. You know, it's something at a point in time like this, you got to go out of your way to be visible and carry the torch a little bit. I think people are willing to take chances. I think they're a little bit more forgiving. They understand that we're going to make some mistakes. And we're not making big bets. You know, 24 months, 18 months seems like an eternity now, Hunter. I look at a project plan that says it's going to finish in 2022. Seems like forever. So we're trying to accelerate. We're trying to be visible, and we're trying to reassure people it's okay to take chances, and we're talking to them a lot.
Got it. What's keeping you up at night?
What's keeping me up at night? You know, I think for me, it's when do we get back? If we get back, what are we going to look like, right? And when we, like right now, it's even playing ground. Everybody's staring at the same 13-inch screen, and we're together. When we get back into a bifurcated world where you've got a lot of folks in an organization, in a conference room, you're going to get into that experience situation where some people have a different experience than others, and we've got to find a way, an operating rhythm or a mechanism that allows us to kind of suffer through that and continue to thrive, because right now it's been very good for us. And I know we're spending a lot of time thinking about it. I don't think it's going to happen until first of the year, but we're getting ahead of it now.
Chris, great to see you. Hey, Nikki, could you put up the results of the poll that we did at the opening? The question was, how have your priorities changed since COVID-19? Justin, any insights there that you can that you can relate to?
It's interesting that both the focus on growing and reimagining the business and the employee engagement are both there. I think they're very interrelated, right? The idea of how is our workplace different? How do we engage our employees if we continue to work remotely? And it's interesting actually how close all of them were. So I think the question, the answers we had, you knew would resonate with most people. But we're in a really unique place where the company now knows that the technology can work and we can function as a business. But do we want to function like this long term? And are there certain areas where we can do better? There was a poll out by Buffett that said that one of the main things that people don't like about working from home is loneliness. So that's not a technology issue, and there's probably things we can do, and engagement is there. But as an organization, where do we swing this pendulum? Where are we most optimized? And I think as we get into some of the things that Wendy said about employee reviews and some of the more complex things on evaluation and promotion and leadership and mentoring and some of the soft skills things that are difficult to assess from work from home, it'll be very interesting to see where we choose as different companies to land, because we've certainly shown as technologists we can make it work when we have to. Now as things settle and we go back, will be interesting to see where we decide we want to be.
Excellent, great insights. Thanks, Justin. Sure. Hey, Brian, when you look at this poll, any thoughts?
Yeah, you know, I think one of the things that a number of folks have kind of mentioned is this area about innovation and productivity. I think it's a wake-up call to ensuring that our employees have the tools. And I think, you know, as we all know, trying to support a work from home, you know, workforce, which may not have been, you know, our former models, you know, it's a reality check in terms of, like, you find out how many people don't have connectivity, or how many people seldom go to certain applications and other sort of things that you kind of instinctively, you know, didn't necessarily pay attention to, or at least I may not have necessarily paid as much attention to. You know, I think it's encouraging, you know, looking at sort of some of this focus on continuity. You know, for us, I think, you know, we're pretty steeped in our cybersecurity efforts, but I think it's been an opportunity for us to kind of engage with employees on a more one-on-one basis. You know, and I think something that Justin just said, I think is really important, because I think no matter what, we're going to obviously move back to a world where we're not going to be as much, you know, together in an office environment as we had probably been in the past, you know, so it's probably going to be some form of a hybrid. And I think one of the challenges in that model is sort of developing a certain element of empathy for sort of some of your coworkers. You know, it's easy to kind of get focused on your own world and that type of thing. So we're looking at different things with our corporate portals where we can sort of, we're actually now just put together a little, you know, kind of engage in game with folks, a little trivia game where kind of we teach them about different parts of other lines of businesses that we have and things like that, to sort of like broaden sort of the awareness, so that these kind of like long tails outside of traditional G&A and other areas, you know, that people become familiar with how they operate and things, because we're, you know, obviously we can't work very effectively if we kind of, you know, can't support one another.
Brian, it's always good to see you, my friend. You know, in closing, I really want to thank everyone for coming on the session on HMG Live, and appreciate your ongoing engagement and support. It hasn't been easy. It's been a really challenging time for us all, but I think we've really kept our community connected. So Wendy, thank you. Brian, again, thank you. Justin, great to meet you, and thank you. Chris, great job.
Thanks, Hunter.
We'll see you all soon.
Thanks. See you soon.
Next up is Helen Norris. She's the VP and CIO of Chapman University. Helen, welcome to the program, Anticipating the Future of Work, Building on Lessons Learned from the Crisis.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Hunter. What a great conversation and what great content so far. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And I'm looking forward to hearing the perspectives of our two great panelists, Theresa Miller from Lionsgate and Nicole Turner-Lee from the Brookings Institute. Let's begin by asking Nicole and Theresa to introduce themselves and briefly describe their backgrounds. They have really interesting profiles as professionals. So Nicole, let me ask you to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your background.
I am the director of the Center for Technology Innovation at Brookings. And in that space, we work on everything from regulatory and legislative priorities when it comes to advancing digital inclusion or closing the digital divide, as some would say, as well as looking at, general policy issues from privacy to infrastructure, all the way down to spectrum policy that some of you actually may be dealing with as CIOs. And in addition to all of those things, I work in the area of artificial intelligence, particularly new tools that are creating different efficiencies. And I have a book coming out, shameless plug, on the digital divide that will be out in early next year, 2021. Thanks for having me.
Great, thank you. Thank you for being here. Theresa, can you please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your background?
Sure. Nicole's a tough act to follow.
She is.
But I'm Theresa Miller. I'm the CIO at Lionsgate Entertainment. I've been here for, wow, way too many years to count. I've been in the entertainment industry for about 30 years. Lionsgate actually creates feature films and television programs and distributes them in all the various channels throughout the world. And one of our big brands is Starz, which is the pay channel as well as the streaming app. So that's our play in the streaming space. And my team and I really just, support the underlying technology for all of those distribution channels.
Well, great. Well, thanks. Well, Theresa, thinking about that as we anticipate the future of work, both in your own team or across the organization, I think we all want to build a little bit on some of the lessons that we learned through the crisis. Can you tell us a wee bit about Lionsgate's experience through the crisis and some of the lessons that you're taking away from it or that the organization is taking away?
Sure. I mean, I think like a lot of companies, one of the areas that, or the types of tools that were the most successful for us have been these cloud-based tools. Mm-hmm. They're accessible from any type of device, anywhere. So that really fits with this distributed work environment. I would talk about video conferencing, obviously, almost overnight we had to have everyone up and running on video conferencing, and our leadership team was great about that. I mean, my boss, said to his direct reports almost immediately, not only do you have to know how to use video conferencing, but you have to be able to share documents and do the chat. And he expected all of us to be leaders in that space and model that for the organization. So, a lot of things that we learned, I think the tools for communicating effortlessly, things like chats, things like Slack, or we use WebEx Teams, right? So that people can connect and stay engaged even if they're not seeing someone in the hallway, right? So all of those tools have been beneficial, and we've seen just really fast learning and uptake on all of those.
Great. Nicole, what are some of the technology innovations that you've seen organizations leveraging throughout the crisis? And do you think that they're going to leverage those same innovations in the future?
That have tended to address the social distancing requirements. And so the fact that we've actually had people that are doing things via streaming, I think is really, one way to advance the use of technology tools. I think also what we have seen in terms of businesses are better collaboration tools, as Theresa talked about, much more engagement across, using things like shared drives or cloud-based services. Much different environment than what we saw. And for those of us that were sort of not, wanting to actually adopt cloud-based storage, we actually are, because that's the best way for us to share. But I also want to add, and I think that there have been different business models for dealing with the customer. A lot of these have been more internal to the companies, but for the customer, we're actually seeing a different route when it comes to the use of technology. Given the fact that people could not go into stores, I think we're seeing a lot more electronic transactions, whether it's through, general commerce in terms of what a person is buying, what we're seeing in terms of video regarding like entertainment. Theresa could probably attest to this, concerts, previews of movies, all of that is migrating online in a very different way. And so I'm actually really interested, I think you have a question in there from Helen, how this actually continues beyond the pandemic if we ever get to an end. Whether or not people are going to go back to in-person gatherings, it's still questionable. I think a lot of people saved a lot of money by doing what we're doing today. I think that, you know, in addition to the public health crisis, that we're finding that we probably could have been doing this all along versus having a lot of people traveling across the country to actually partake in these kinds of meetings. The question becomes, and I think for the audience here, whatever we do more of tomorrow or today or tomorrow, the less we'll do of something else. So we'll have to be mindful as we go into the future, particularly in my research, disruptors of scale stay disruptors of scale, right? And there are going to be some opportunities that will be optimized, but there'll be areas, you know, and I'm thinking, Theresa, particularly your industry, where it may be different and we may need to continue to leverage these types of tools going forward in entertainment. That will have an impact ultimately on business models. And we can talk about that more, Helen, as we go forward.
That sounds great. Theresa, that's a good segue to a question for you. You know, we mentioned you've already mentioned some of the solutions that you leveraged at Lionsgate, particularly cloud-based solutions. And then Nicole brought up this concept of using cloud-based solutions for customer interactions as well as for internal interactions. Can you talk a little bit more about some of those tools that you've used at Lionsgate throughout the pandemic?
Sure. So, I mean, from our industry, we really already had, you know, we're quite advanced in the digital space, right? So there were already streaming channels. I mentioned we have our Star streaming app. I think something that was already in place, but really became, you know, much more the primary way to release movies is really direct to digital and those premium digital offerings. So, you know, for example, Lionsgate had a film that had released a couple of weeks before the COVID shutdown, and we had to pivot really quickly to offer that digitally to our customers. And, you know, there's quite a bit of work put into looking at, you know, what the pricing would be around that. Would people pay more to see a movie digitally if they got to see it, you know, earlier than they expected? So I think, you know, obviously, as Nicole said, I do think these will have a long-term impact on our industry. I mean, already our companies are looking at what it takes to produce a movie and, you know, what are the economics around releasing in a movie theater. Right now, we can't do that, and that's, you know, had a huge impact on the industry. I believe theaters were scheduled to open this month, and now that's still in discussion, right? So we won't know. And, you know, in the future, again, what are the long-term impacts of something like COVID on the moviegoer? So, so obviously what's great is that we have these other channels available to us for distribution. And, you know, that's really kind of what the company is focusing on, is really looking at the equation across all those different ways of releasing and trying to pick the best one for the particular film.
And you raise a good point that, you know, we're focusing on on distribution and customer interaction, but production of content is very different now. As Nicole mentioned, we used to do these kinds of things in person, now we're doing them online, but I can't imagine the challenges. You know, that production of content in the entertainment industry, it's just not even possible, I think.
Well, believe it or not, it is starting to open back up again. Not quite yet in LA, but it is across the country and obviously in foreign territories, which are kind of ahead of us on the curve with COVID. I'm not an expert in what's going on for production, but a lot of effort has been put in by the industry to really try to make that the most secure environment possible for individuals. Yeah, it's just a lot of anything you imagine for the workplace, you can imagine it in triplicate for people.
I can't imagine. I tell you, it's a lot like what we heard earlier around the sports, right? That trying to keep those events as safe and as secure for the players as possible. It's the same with entertainment. Now, Nicole, we've talked a lot about the pandemic being a global disruptor, but obviously industries have been disrupted in major ways before by technology innovations, and you have a particular focus on that in your research. Can we learn from the lessons of those previously disrupted industries as we work through this crisis?
Not only have we seen, you know, traditional disruption, we're now seeing some of the disruptors disrupted, if that makes sense. You know, look at what happened to Uber, right?
Yeah.
They had to lay off 3,000 workers as a result of the changing model of social distancing and the fact that people weren't going to get in cars with folks, even if it offered a less expensive ride. They've had to retool their model. And so I think, you know, one example that stands out, and it is around the entertainment, is like the music industry. If you just look at the music industry generally. I mean, going back to, and I won't tell people my age, but I will say that I do remember, you know, an 8-track cassette that my dad owned, right? And I also remember what my kids look at, like the cassette player that they never saw before, to the CD, the DVD, and now MP3, and now what's in the cloud. I mean, that has been the wave of tech to sort of make more efficient, cheaper, in terms of the things that people buy, right, or the things that we consume, to bring some seamless, you know, processing to our own lives. You know, airline tickets, everything. I mean, technology has essentially disrupted every aspect of our lives, and I think throughout the pandemic, it is further disrupting that. I mean, there are, I have to share, like the other day I was in my car, and I live in a community, Alexandria, Virginia, where they have small suburban storefronts, and I've seen, you know, the photo framer is now out of business, or, you know, the local seamstress is out of business. So those industries that were highly dependent upon physical contact have been disrupted by both the general wave of technology, where no one wants to go into a store anymore. They want to buy online instead of being in line, right? But they also are subjected to the economic woes of this pandemic. And I like what Theresa's saying. I mean, I think for everybody that is listening, this is a really good time to actually reimagine business. Reimagine what work looks like, you know, reimagine how you actually digitize some of your functions to be much more effective, as this new normal has already, you know, arrived. It's not going back. There are so many people like my mother, you know, who's in her 70s, who are benefiting from Instacart or other brands where her groceries are being delivered to her home, that I don't even think I'm going to get her back into a grocery store, you know, one, because of a public health concern, but two, because it was so easy. And so I think, you know, again, we have to start thinking about this period of time as to what have we learned in what I call like this 3 to 4 month pilot about the resiliency of our organizations, the resiliency of our workers, and the extent to which we're actually positioning businesses to be far more successful as this digital train continues to accelerate. And so everything that your company thought about before has already been disrupted, right, in these last 3 months. And going forward, it's going to be just really imperative to think about how do you change those models to accommodate where business is going now. And so I want to kind of just lean in real quick on Theresa's question. I mean, I know, for example, with Stars, you guys just previewed a movie online. You know, there are things like that that industries would have never thought about doing based on the monetization structure that I think we're going to see a lot more of.
Great, thank you. Theresa, kind of building on that a little bit, obviously your team has been disrupted by the pandemic, and we expect this disruption to continue, and we expect there to be new models of work. But what techniques do you employ as a leader as you work through the issues that this raises for your team? Because we've heard people on previous panels talk about loneliness and the need to blend different roles. What are you seeing from where you sit?
Sure. I mean, one thing that I will say is that our HR department and our company management, you know, is really been thoughtful about the employees and has given us as leaders in the organization some tools to use, right? So we've had a focus on things like mental health. We've had a, you know, a whole set of activities like yoga for Lionsgate, and, you know, weekly emails with, you know, links and things to help and, you know, engage your kids in different, you know, virtual tours. All those kind of things have been happening. And I think, you know, that's been hugely helpful for me, because I don't have to think about those things. I mean, for me personally, I still feel that sort of connection with your employees is really important, doing it more frequently. So we've definitely done that. One of the things that's been really successful for us is really creating these cross-functional, really small teams to tackle and deal with things quickly. And I think one of the other panelists earlier talked about that, and that's been hugely successful for us. And that's been something that the leadership team has done across the organization.
Great, thank you. Nicole, kind of shifting gears a little bit, When I read in your profile, and you mentioned this earlier, you've done a lot of really interesting research about digital equity and inclusion, or what we think of as the digital divide. And working in a university, you know, I see that with students as well as with our faculty and our staff. Can you talk a little bit more about what impact that's going to have on our society in the context of this new normal?
So when you think that you're actually capturing everybody because people tend to have a smartphone or a tablet, we're really not. There are still challenges when it comes to the availability of broadband. If you live in rural communities, you might as well forget it in terms of having something that is a seamless connection simply because the facilities are not there. If you live in urban, you may actually be challenged by the cost in sustaining it simply because maybe you don't have a lot of competition or there's not build out directly to the home in some way or form. You know, I would just tell people, look at what happened to the 53 million school-age children in this country during COVID-19. You know, a good proportion, about 12 to 15 million of those kids did not have broadband at home, let alone a device to actually ride off of broadband to do the things like, you know, multimedia streaming, etc. So the digital divide is real. And I think one of the things I like to say with regards to the companies that are represented, it is easy to assume that everybody is connected. And I think some of the earlier panelists talked about, you know, just some of the challenges that are associated with trying to get more people online. But we have to be careful going forward because the digital divide is certainly real. And it's something that is going to impact our ability to equitably diffuse digital resources, you know, across the board.
Yeah, great topic. I mean, we could talk about this for hours and the impact that this has across society. But I have a question for both of you, and then we have a really great question for you, Nicole, from the audience. But let me throw one other question out to start with you, Theresa, and then move on to Nicole. What do you think, Theresa, the new normal will look like across the globe? How will organizations work in a year from, put on your futurist hat, you know, in a year from now or in 3 years from now? What will be our normal? What do you think? What do you predict?
Sure. I mean, I think, you know, a lot of the panelists have said it. The tools that we've adopted, they're not going to go away. I think video conferencing is still going to be happening. It's efficient. It's helped to really break down those borders, particularly international borders, to help teams work more closely and feel more close to each other. You know, I think it's this whole idea of being more agile and cross-functional is going to stay. It's been successful. And, you know, the other thing is really having the executive team talking about reimagining the business and trying to pivot and you know, continue to innovate. And so we've had a big focus on that at Lionsgate. I've been excited to be a part of that, but it's really been a company-wide effort. It can't just be an IT effort. So I think that's where I see us in the future.
Great, no, a great point. Nicole, what about you? Where do you see us in 1 year and then 3 years? And then I'll throw out the question from the audience when you answer that.
You know, I think in the next year, the new normal is probably going to be an amplified version of what we're actually dealing with now, which is why digital equity is really important to me. Because I think as we move from an analog society to one which is much more digital, we are going to have these mandated requirements of people actually connecting over these networks. And I think the networks in and of themselves have proved themselves to be resilient for the amount of consumer demand for broadband. But obviously, I think as a country, we're going to have a lot more work to do as we try to build out these networks and create, you know, faster networks like 5G technology, et cetera. I think in 3 years, though, that when we see emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and other positioning technologies come into play, I think that's going to add a different dynamic. And so what I would suggest to people from the workforce perspective is to start preparing people now. You know, I think in many respects, what happened in these last 3 months is we kind of knew that we had a digital divide. We kind of knew that we were going more towards digital resources, but we didn't really think it was going to happen this quickly and that this pandemic was going to act as an accelerant to make us all go online. And so I think as we kind of come out of this, whenever we come out of this, it's going to be the strength of these tools that matter, but those tools, these tools that we are actually using are going to change our business models. I can't say that enough. And they're going to change the way we interact internally and how we interact externally. So technically, and I'll put this on as my policy hat, I think in 3 years, the conversation will not be around networks and resiliency. And, you know, I think it's going to be around consumer trust. And I think it's going to be a conversation around, our stewardship of people's online presence and information and personal data that's going to matter as this becomes much more of a voluminous, right, in terms of what we're actually contributing to the internet. And so that would be like my policy suggestion going forward, that as CIOs, you begin to think about your best practices in terms of data collection and how you're using that and how you're, shepherding that in a way, because with most places going online, people will be able to pick and choose who they feel to be most trustworthy and who they think as a company really respects their online presence. And that's from an external customer facing view, as well as internally. I think employees will begin to demand that, in the next few years.
That's a great point, Nicole. And I think we've seen just a little bit of that at the beginning of the crisis when serious questions were raised about the privacy issues related to the tool that we're using right now, right? Zoom, and Zoom had to respond to that in order to continue to support us through the pandemic. Sort of a follow-up to that, Rushdie Aris, one of our participants, asked the question regarding what is the Brookings Institution forecasting the technological impact of the multiple waves of the pandemic? So I think the interesting thing about Rushdie's question is that focus on the multiple waves. So can you comment a little bit on that, please?
I can tell you this, within sectors like the financial sector, educational sector, we're actually going to have scholars working on, things that are more immediate, like reopening, down to the implications, the long term of where we are in this digital new normal. In fact, Rushdie, I love your question so much. I'm going to take it on. I just became the new director of the Center for Technology Innovation. So this gives me an opportunity to see how my group is responding to that. But I do think, as we have more conversations around what is being considered this new digital normal, again, certain things about this were not normal before, which was the digital divide, but certain things will be normalized as a result of this pandemic as we realize the things that we can actually do with technology. The extent to which that, were changes because we're in the middle of a national election and whether those priorities will be there, the extent to which companies will be responsive, a little bit or go to the deep end in terms of changing their business models is still something I think that has to be explored. And technological impact in terms of my degree is really measured oftentimes by, the responsiveness of the market or where there's market failure. And so we'll see, going forward, what those waves look like. I think those of us on this call don't even know what those waves look like at this point, but such a great question. And please follow up with me at Brookings for any of the questions that you all have with regards to the research.
Great. Well, thank you. I'd like to wrap up by giving, we've had some great conversation, great questions. Theresa, I just want to give you 30 seconds to wrap up with any final thoughts you might have before we hand it back to Hunter.
Sure. I think, it's an exciting time for us. It's a great time for IT and technology to be showcased, and we really need to take this opportunity and to really work with our business partners and think about some of the things Nicole talked about, really making this a long-term change and really facilitating and helping our businesses.
Great. Thank you. Thank you both. What a great conversation. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Hunter.
Hey, Helen, great job. And Nicole and Theresa, awesome. Really appreciate your engagement. Awesome. So our closing panel today is Securing the Future of Work. Sean Frazier is the advisory CISO at Duo Security. Hey, Sean, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks, Hunter. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. Hey, the whole pandemic's brought around a whole different landscape of security threats and concerns. What's in your mind today, and how can you help our CISOs and IT leaders and CIOs?
So I think the good news is, I'm a glass half full kind of guy. The good news is I think we've been preparing for this for like 10 years, right? And some folks in your earlier panels talked about cloud technology as being enablers and mobile technology as being enablers. And when we first got punched in the face with this back in kind of March and April, it was tough. And people had to kind of, stand up more resources like VPNs and more servers and things. But I think once we got everything under control, we realized that this really was an opportunity to leverage this technology going forward, getting out of the application business, getting out of the business of providing, data centers and these kinds of things when someone else can do a better job of keeping the lights on for those things and scaling those things than we ever could. So it allows us to innovate. We really are building a platform for innovation around security, around delivery that I think will serve us well for the next 10 years.
Where do you see the biggest threats with this new architecture?
So I think the biggest threats is just not understanding and knowing where the threats come from, right? So you have to understand what applications you're delivering, whether that be in the cloud or be on-prem, or whether you built that yourself and you got it over in a server under your desk somewhere. You have to understand what are the crown jewels and the things you want to protect, and it's really about the data. It really is not necessarily about the application, it's not necessarily about the device, it's about the data you need to protect. And taking that holistic mindset, applying that to your data wherever that data lives, and knowing that that data will live everywhere. It'll live in the cloud, it'll live on someone's mobile device when they're traveling on a plane or in a taxi cab. It'll live wherever that data is closest to the end user. Making sure you understand that is really, where you kind of, understand the risks of what you care about. And at the end of the day, every organization cares about the data, right? You're not a device company. Lionsgate is a movie company. They don't create devices, but yet they manage devices for their employees. What they really care about is delivering that service, delivering that capability of data to their end users.
So any further concerns regarding this hybrid model where eventually we're going to be partly at work and partly at home and very distributed?
So I think it actually works out better for us because, again, if you kind of distill your security care-abouts down to the lowest common denominator of a user on some kind of device accessing data, that really can be whatever, it really can be from anywhere. So again, it doesn't matter where the data center is. It doesn't matter where that user is and accessing that data. If you put your security controls and your security constructs down on that level, right? And you focus maniacally on end user experience, because that's the other little dirty secret about security is that if you don't focus on the end user experience, users will find a way. We live in an era where I carry around a more powerful computer in my pocket than I carried around on my desk 10 or 15 years ago. So users will figure out a way to get their work done without you or with you. So it better be with you.
Oh, great. Great stuff. Sean, stay with us. We'll circle back to you. Thanks. Next up is Wanda Jones-Heath. Wanda is the CISO for the United States Air Force. Hey, Wanda, great to have you on the program today.
Hi, how you doing, Hunter?
Awesome. So yeah, it's a big role that you have, right? It's thank you for service, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
When you think of overall enterprise security, what's top of mind for you today in your current role?
Oh, that's a huge one, Hunter. A lot of folks have already talked about it, is just knowing the footprint of your network, knowing where all of your devices from the endpoints all the way into the user devices, how are they connecting, where are they connecting from, and then who are those folks who are connecting. The identity management piece is huge. Trying to ensure that, as Sean talked about, the data is important. When we collaborate, when we share data, it's about the data level of protections. And so we're focusing a huge amount of effort on that, along with understanding our network, understand our user experience. Sean mentioned that as well, because if you don't have the network that is usable, folks will go out and procure other devices that may not be protected at the right level.
Do you have a layer in there to detect net new devices that might be rogue that are jumping on the network?
Oh, absolutely. We've focused over the last couple of years of automation, looking at ways that as you connect, we kind of know when you come out of the box, so to speak, to ensure that we know where you're coming from and then what you're trying to access. So we spent a large amount of time kind of focusing in that area.
Okay, great. Coming out of this crisis with COVID-19, how did you have to react at the Air Force?
At the speed of light. Just like others have talked about, we had to pivot fairly quickly. When you're talking about over 690,000 users all going from office to home, that is traumatic. But the great thing about it is we were able to demonstrate that The infrastructure was sound. We had some gaps. We plugged them really quickly. We updated infrastructure. We allowed folks to connect using personal devices, using government issue devices. And so we have a huge footprint now that we're managing through automation, through ensuring that we're catching incidents properly. So it's, you know, it allowed us to see that what we could do all along. It just allowed us to do it even faster.
Wendy, you have a humble point of view or approach. I mean, man, how did you do that? That was a lot of work.
Partnerships. We're just one service. The DoD and the entire, my counterparts in the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps, we all are fighting the same fight. We have a mission to accomplish no matter what the situation is. And our job was to ensure that from a technology standpoint, from a collaboration standpoint, that we had the right tools in place. We even looked at policies that kind of prohibit us from operating as fast as we could. So it was just a combination of all types of folks who came together to make it possible.
Now, I know you probably can't talk about those relationships with other agencies, but is it fair to say that the relationships are better than ever in terms of collaboration?
Oh, absolutely. We figured out fairly quickly that we had to work together. And we had to ensure that as we moved quickly, that we also considered the security implications and then understood what the risks were at all levels.
And how would you characterize your leadership style over the past, say, 4 months?
I wouldn't say chaotic, but it's been fun. Just ensuring that from a people, process, and technology standpoint, that we cover all the bases. Huge focus on our people, ensuring that as we transition into a more digital environment, that they can also transition their role and use those collaboration tools that we quickly got to the inventory, being able to authenticate quickly so they can start their business days. So it's been a chore. We spent a lot of time ensuring that we have strong partnerships with our industry, as well as my cohorts and other services, and throughout the entire Air Force.
Well, and again, thanks for coming on the program. I'll circle back to you here in a minute.
So I'm going to chime in real quick and give Wanda a lot of kudos and credit because she won't take it herself. But a lot of the innovation that's happening in DoD right now is a direct result of some of the work her and her team have been doing around agile development, starting with Kessel Run years ago. So hats off to Wanda. I'm a big fan, and I knew you wouldn't say that yourself. So here you go.
Thank you so much, Sean.
There you go. Love it. Hey, next up is Veronica Mitchell. Veronica is the CISO of the city of Santa Monica. Veronica, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, you know what? Everyone loves Santa Monica. I think what a beautiful, ideal kind of environment, right? With the surf and the waves and the Muscle Beach, right? There's all that is right there. Is that right?
Correct. We have had some challenges lately because of the COVID-19 having to close those beaches. So they haven't loved us so much these days.
Oh, right. Of course. So, well, what's on your mind? So post COVID-19, by about 3 or 4 months, we're into this, probably the second wave, I guess people are calling it.
Yes. So some of our top challenges or critical challenges for us is that because of COVID-19 and we provide services to constituents, we haven't been able to engage with them personally. So we've had to become creative as to how we engage with some of those business services or provide those business services digitally. In some instances, we have been able to accommodate that, but in some instances, we will have to discontinue some of those services. And that means that we will have to furlough staff, or we've had to furlough staff. We've also had to go through a layoff process. And so some of those services that we once provided that were instrumental to our constituents, we no longer have. However, now that we've moved to more of a digitized workforce or work unit, we, from a security perspective, have to make sure that we are protecting the city's constituents' data. And so, although my CIO was instrumental. He was tasked with making sure that all the workforce were able to continue on with their business structure. And of course, I'm tasked with making sure that we're able to properly secure it. And so that has been more of a challenge, right? Because as previous panelists have, or speakers have kind of spoken to, the bad guys have tried to circumvent some of our processes, or even tried to use us as an attacking vector to gain access to our systems. So what have we done to kind of put certain things in place to prevent these types of things from happening? Of course, we made sure that we're protecting the data. And Sean and Wanda, I'm totally on board with what all of you said. If I could just say echo to what you said, of course, we're doing many of those types of things as well. We have to make sure that we protect the data. And with the collaborative tools or solutions that we have in place, we have to make sure that it's not just the device, right? Because we're not so concerned with, we're concerned with the device, making sure it has the appropriate security controls, but our concern is also on making sure that we properly protect the data and it maintains the privacy in which it should have. And so our goal is making sure we're using multi-factor authentication, we're having some type of VPN access, and that users are leveraging those solutions. And that has been an aggressive move for us to make sure that if you have a Mac versus a Windows machine, that Mac machine also has the appropriate MFA and VPN access to it as well. So those are some of the challenges that we face or we're kind of dealing with. And kudos to like many of the staff members internally for making sure that we were able to aggressively move toward the solution. Our CIO had already taken steps to kind of move us to certain areas. And so it made it an easier transition to accommodating the workforce. So we did have a bit of a challenge getting to a remote workforce, but I'm told not as much as others because we were already kind of preparing ourselves for that.
Excellent. And when you think about your leadership style over the past 3 or 4 months, how do you characterize that, Veronica?
I would say I've probably been very aggressive. I wouldn't say assertive, I would certainly say aggressive, because I wanted to make sure that those areas where there were gaps, that we were properly protecting ourselves. And I'm still going down that path, right? Because I want to make sure this was a city whose focus was not on security or cybersecurity, and I've been in the role for 2 years. So those things that were challenges before only escalated when we moved in some degree to this digitized workforce, so digitized remote workforce. So wanted to make sure we have the appropriate security controls in place to accommodate those things.
Well, nice job, Veronica. I mean, let's face it, this hasn't been easy. It's been a lot of hard work. And the very fact that everyone here that's on the program today is here on the program talking about this journey, you really, at some point when you realize the significance of what we were about to go through, you had to make a decision in your mind, are you all in or are you not? And how are you going to lead and lean into it, right? Lean into it with courage and passion on authenticity and be courageous enough to know sometimes you're not going to know the answers, but to keep going forward, hoping, believing that you'll figure it out, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And artificial intelligence has been an aided benefit to us as well. We'd already purchased some solutions because we were a small, a relatively lean cybersecurity team. So we had to make sure we placed reliance on some of the things, the artificial intelligence, things like Darktrace and other tools that are certainly we're leveraging that add value to what we're trying to do here at the city.
Excellent. Stay with us. We'll circle back to you in a minute. Hey, Sean, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Hunter.
When you think about budgeting for security initiatives and getting the attention of the C-suite, that's always a topic, right? And how best to get in front of the C-suite and present the business case, that tension of innovation, right, and a safe and secure enterprise, how best to get their attention to get those new dollars for that next new initiative?
So if the CISO is not part of the C-suite, they should be. Security should be part of every conversation that you have, because you got to think of security as an enabler, not a detractor. And I think what's one of the things that people tend to do is they think, well, I'll worry about security at the end of this process. Right now, I'm going to deliver a capability and I'm going to bolt that on at the end and I'm going to do audit, and security people are going to be responsible for keeping me secure. And you have to flip the script a little bit. You got to think of security as being more part of DNA. So as you deploy an application, the security people ought to be right there with you, kind of thinking how you deploy it. Do you do cloud? Do you do hybrid cloud? Where are you going to put it? How are you going to protect it? Some of the things Veronica said are very key, which is, you know, do the basics really well. Do multi-factor authentication, encrypt all the things, make sure you know where all your data resides. And that will help you with the budget aspect as well, because you'll be integrated into the process to be able to think, okay, well, what is the budget for multi-factor authentication? What is the budget for protecting this application, whether that be TLS-enabled point-to-point connectivity, or we're going to outsource that to the cloud? Is it going to be full SaaS, or are we going to manage part of it? That's got to be part of the DNA. It's got to be part of the early part of the conversation, not at the end.
Okay, great. And then how best to get along with the CEO, in your opinion?
Again, be a business enabler. I always encourage folks, and it's been many, many years since I was doing any kind of practitioner stuff, but to me, it was always, hey, I'm the security guy. I'm here to help. I'm not here to tell you no. I'm not here to tell you that we're not going to deliver business, or we're going to require you to take an extra 6 months of audit before you can deliver that business. I am here to figure out, you know, take a risk-based approach, how to figure out to get the best security we can get and still deliver what the business needs to deliver, which is why it's kind of interesting to see this now, where you see a lot of security people like CISOs having MBAs or business degrees, because they're kind of understanding and having to understand the way the business operates, because they are the business. Delivering security is part of that.
When you think of protecting your intellectual property in this remote enterprise, how are folks doing that?
So again, intellectual property is the data. So if you boil down the threat surface to its lowest common denominator, you're looking at, what do I as an organization care about? And I care about my people first and foremost, absolutely. But as far as protection, I care about protecting that data, and that data might be intellectual property. So making sure you've got all the right protections around that. And you know, and those can be anywhere from, as Veronica pointed out, multi-factor authentication, could be data, you know, some kind of DLP or some kind of capability where you're looking at that data, where it lives, where can it live, where do I allow access from, where am I going to allow that data to go to. So all of those things are a security practitioner's kind of tool belt with regards to a risk-based approach to protecting the data, which in a lot of cases is that intellectual property.
John, thanks for coming on the program. Great job. And how can folks get in touch with you or the folks at Duo?
So I'm easy. So I'm Sean, SEAN @duo.com. Feel free to reach out to me at any point. I'm also on Twitter. I tweet every once in a while, at least once every couple of weeks.
Awesome.
That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. But yeah, just visit duo.com. We got tons of information.
Thanks, Sean, for coming on the program. And thanks for supporting the summit model. Hey,
Thanks
Wanda,
so much,
when you look at the future, what's your future focus and approach?
You know, as we continue to operate in this hybrid environment, you know, trying to figure out, you know, how do we stay the course and improve, you know, user experience, working with our defense industrial-based industry partners is huge. We've talked a lot about inside the wire is what I call. So outside the wire is, you know, making sure that the protections are in place for all of the folks who provide the capabilities to the Air Force and to the DoD. So focusing on, you know, their protection measures, they're protecting the data at the right levels, ensuring they're protecting the intellectual property as well, and continuing the partnerships, like Sean mentioned, you know, getting to the table and staying at the table, building those partnerships, you know, with the functional communities that I have to support. Cybersecurity is here. We're in the forefront, and we need to stay active in how we support the businesses within the Air Force.
Excellent. Hey, Wanda, always great to see you. Thanks so much for the support and active engagement. Hey, Veronica, final comment, final word on your future focus, what you're looking at now? You're on mute there.
Sorry about that. My future focus is on securing more of the supply chain. Sort of like what you spoke to, Wanda, we are a cloud-first solution or organization. And so if we're a cloud-first solution, I want to make sure we have the appropriate controls in place, that we're not procuring a solution that doesn't necessarily have considered security in mind or in focus. And so we have sort of a process in place that we have as far as validating or assessing those particular third-party solutions, and they go through our validation process. We have means of actually validating what they tell you, because we have a questionnaire, of course, but then on the questionnaire, we also ask for the SOC type 2 report, and we have a means of actually doing sort of an internet scrape of their environment just to kind of confirm as to what they're telling us is actually what we see. And so, and we can continue to monitor their environment just to make sure that we're not opening any, exposing the city to any other external threats. That we haven't actually considered in our own environment. So our goal is any solution that we engage with should be better postured from a security perspective, not worse. And so we make sure that we implement a process in place. We have a process in place to ensure that that is indeed the case.
Excellent stuff. Veronica, great job. Thanks for coming on the show today. And Wanda, again, thanks. Sean, thanks. And thank you, Chris. Great job. Looking forward to our next summit, folks. Take care and stay in touch and be safe. Bye now.